See, after Dorcas died, the widows came and they were standing in the room and they started showing Peter the robes and the other clothing that she had made. Peter has been brought in. The disciples have called the apostle down. So Peter has come to see Dorcas, and it says the widows are gathering around and they're weeping because they're going to miss this woman. There's sadness, there's pain. Who was Dorcas? You know, Dorcas wasn't a popular person, and yet she had affected the lives of these people to such a degree that when she died, it says they gathered together and they were weeping and they started showing Peter the coats and the different things that she had made, the different things that Dorcas had done. Well, you may think, well, you know, that's not that big a deal. You're living in a different time than Dorcas did. See, Dorcas didn't run down to the mercantile and pick up some fabric. She didn't then sit down and cut out a pattern and put it together on her singer and say, there you go, you got a new dress for you. It may very well have been that for Dorcas to hand out coats, she had to go out and find herself a sheep that was willing to part with some hair. Now let's start spinning some yarn. Well, I don't know how long that takes. I know I have watched some of these demonstrations where they start spinning wool into yarn, and I'll tell you, it looks like it takes an awful long time to me. So then once you had this yarn made, well, then it had to be washed. It had to be washed and combed, and then it had to be spun together into yarn. Now she had to dye it because you wouldn't want to give just white coats away or black coats, whatever kind of dirty sheep you had. So now she had to color it and dye it and bring it out and then spin it and then weave it, and then finally she had a piece of fabric that she could now start putting into garment. This wasn't an easy task, and it wasn't just half a day's work. Each garment could have quite easily taken her like a week or more to make. And yet it says they're standing around and they're showing Peter the garments and the robes that she has made. They're showing Peter what this woman has invested her life in. They're showing the care, the love that this woman had for others, that she would give herself to doing this and making this. Well, what purpose is a coat? Like, it's just a coat. Live without one and find out how quickly you want one. And yet her care was seen in the time that she took, in the time that she gave to these other people. So being something to someone in need will make sure that you get remembered. When you choose to be something to someone in need, you will be talked about long after you're gone. Now, we can probably all remember somebody that has helped us out at some time or other in our need. When we were growing up, it might have been a neighbor, it might have been your father, it might have been a teacher, it might have been a Sunday school teacher, it could have been a youth leader, it might have been, somebody you just met, but you were in a time of need, and somebody reached out and they helped you. Somebody reached out and they became something to you. What happens even when you grow apart? Maybe you move to a different part of the country. This person is still around, and yet you talk about them, and every so often their name comes up. And every time you talk about them, there's a fond memory associated with them. And somebody will say, well, we used to have this neighbor. And you go, yeah, we had this neighbor. And just all of a sudden inside your heart, this little bit of joy rises up because you remember this neighbor, and you remember what that neighbor did for you. See, Dorcas chose to be something. And she was something to these people that needed these clothes, that needed these coats. She was something to them. See, when we have this type of memory, it's something that can happen years ago, but you'll remember it like it was yesterday. You'll remember like it just happened just the day before. All of our memories of that person are fond memories. Why? Because they took that extra step. They went that mile beyond. Well, guess what? Each one of us can be something to someone. You don't have to have a whole bunch of special gifts and talents. You don't have to have a whole bunch of this or that. What you have to have is you have to have a willingness to be something. You might be the ear. You might be the something that somebody phones because they got nobody else to talk to, and they need somebody to share something, somebody to talk with, somebody to bounce some advice off of, somebody to just sit there, somebody to just listen and say, somebody cares for you. There's many times where when I get phone calls and different times of the day or the evening often, and people will phone me, and people that aren't church, people that are churched, and the people that are just out there, and it's like they're lost and they don't, and all of a sudden they'll phone, and it's just spending a half hour on the phone and says, there's a different way. I had somebody phone me from northern Alberta the other night, and we spent probably half an hour talking. When we got off the phone the next day or two later, he phones back and says, you don't know what that did to me. He says, when you prayed with me, he says, it was just like something settled over me. Yeah, it's called peace. But we can all be something. Once we quit being so caught up in us, and we start opening our eyes to see what the next one needs. See, too often we have our whole life so wrapped up. This is what I want. This is what I need. This is where I'm going. This is this. And it's me. You don't get away. You just try to take away from me. And then we can't figure out why people aren't coming. It means being open. Well, Pastor, I could never do that. Of course you could if you would get over yourself. How hard is it to listen? 2 ears, 1 mouth. Good memory. Keep that in place. Listen twice as much as you're talking. Yeah, but Pastor, when these people are talking and they're this and they got problems, I know what the answers are. No, you don't even know what the problem is yet.
That's right.
They're needing somebody to connect with. See, Dorcas was something. She chose to be something to people that were in need, and because she chose to be something, we have 7 verses in the New Testament devoted to Dorcas. Now, was she the only one that did something good in that time? Probably not. But this is one particular one that's mentioned, and this is one particular one where we can see that because she chose to be something, here we are 2,000 years later, still talking about her. Who was Dorcas? She was a woman. A woman that chose to give of herself and to be something. The second thing we can see in this part is every one of us can do something. We can be something and we can do something. We need to ask ourselves constantly, are we doing everything we can do? Are we doing what we can do? Are our lives making a difference in somebody else's life? Would the world be a worse place if we left? Now, these are questions we don't like asking ourselves, and on a Mother's Day message, what a downer message. No, it's not a downer message. This is a good message.
Come on. That's good. Good.
When you leave this earth, are people going to be turning around and saying, wow, we're going to miss them? Or are people going to say, oh, yeah, that's too bad. No, let's go for coffee? Are you impacting somebody's life to the point that you are doing something to help them feel better about themselves? Well, I don't know, Pastor. We don't know. We don't always want to make people feel better about themselves. Of course we want to make people feel better themselves. Jesus came not to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. And every one of us has the ability to reach out and show people that there is acceptance for them in the body of Christ. There is acceptance for them in the church, that we as representatives of the church want to reach out and be something, do something for them. But again, it comes back to the place we're going to have to get rid of being selfishness. See, See, we cannot be so wrapped up in our own little worlds and think that we're going to end up impacting somebody. I really believe that there's going to be a lot of people when they leave this earth, people aren't going to know